Big Podcast.
I don't want to repeat this story. I told it last week, but it actually goes really well with this episode. I was recognized last week for some radio work that I did, but the guy didn't know that I had anything to do with it. The work was recognized, but I wasn't recognized. If you want the full story, it's in the last episode of Build a Big Podcast. I love that anonymity of podcasting, and we're going to get into that. It's Build a Big Podcast, the marketing podcast for podcasters. I'm David Hooper. BigPodcast.com is the website. If you want to grow your podcast, get more people to care about your message, have people approach you and say, hey, that was a great podcast. Maybe they don't even know you were involved. This is the podcast for you. I send out a newsletter every week, Friday morning, New York City time. That is called Big Podcast Insider. This episode is the audio edition of that newsletter. You can find it at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Don't write it down. Don't even worry about remembering it. You will have it memorized by the time this episode is over, because I'm going to go through several articles, and at the end of each one, I will remind you. Here's what's coming up. It's issue number 200. I feel like I need the air horn. Who cares? Hype. Can it grow your YouTube audience? Tim's new rules for podcasting. That's Tim Ferriss, by the way. If you like him, even if you don't like him, you're going to want to pay attention. Are you making these podcasting mistakes? BBC sound effects. Get them free. Why am I so tired? Also some classified ads, things that will help you to grow your podcast, get more people to your podcast, to make a podcast that matters. This episode of Build a Big Podcast brought to you by Riverside.fm. You're going to look and sound your best when you record with Riverside, even if you are in a completely different place than your guests or your co-host. Riverside is a virtual studio that makes recording and editing at the highest quality possible. That is because it records you and your guests locally, bypassing poor or unstable internet connections, giving you studio quality, audio and video, no matter where you are. You're going to create high quality with ease, local recordings up to 4K video resolution. So if you're doing video, they got you covered. You're going to get instant transcriptions powered by AI with 99% accuracy, making your podcast more accessible. And that's not just for people. That's making it more accessible to search engines, making it easier to find. You will get more downloads and you'll get more listeners because of it. If you want to check it out, you do. Yeah, you do. You can try it for free. They're going to give you a couple of hours. That's enough for you to get an interview, maybe 2 interviews. Kick the tires, look under the hood, see how you like it, use all the features that I've just talked about and see all the benefits. This is how to make that happen. Go to riverside.fm, get the free account, do an interview, do a recording, just take a look. That's riverside.fm. If you want to stick around, I've got a discount code for you. This is going to get you 15% off. The code is BIGPODCAST, BIGPODCAST. That's riverside.fm. The discount code, BIGPODCAST, BIGPODCAST. All right, let's get to it. I have listed already what we are going through. I've mentioned that in between those things, you're going to hear me mention how to get more information, which is newsletter.bigpodcast.com. You can go there for all the links, more details. If you want to reach out to me with comments, that's where you'll find that, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. You are also going to hear this sound. All these things that I'm talking about are about podcasting, and this sound, that's how you know definitively, without a doubt, that I'm moving on to the next thing. You ready? It's issue number 200. Been waiting to use the air horn. But seriously, who cares? Who cares? This is a weird week for issue 200 because I just celebrated a birthday over the weekend. And this is a true story. I was going to have a birthday party when I turned 10, long time ago. My mother and I were addressing invitations. I was going to send them to my friends. I told her, I don't really want a birthday party. Why that is, I don't know. I was an introvert. Something my mother told me, which is related to this. She was asking me about inviting friends over. And I said, why would I want to do that? I see them all day at school. I am an introvert. I like spending time alone. So being in this 5x8 tricked out closet recording this podcast, I love it. Being recognized for my work, even though the guy didn't know I was involved, he just heard the piece and was moved by it. I like that. I do not need to be the center of attention. But hitting issue 200 for Big Podcast Insider, that got me thinking about how I've lived my life, which is that way. Not really inviting people into my home. I mean, I'm not a hermit. I'm just not throwing parties all the time. Not looking at these milestones. This is one of the things that's changed in my life 12 years ago. That's when I first met my wife. She got me thinking that these little milestones, not just Big Podcast Insider issue 200, but the little milestones that we have in life, those are important. It's the little milestones that make up the big milestones. The little milestones, I mean, that is life. That's living. And if you're not being present toward life, and if you're not taking a moment to step back from whatever it is that you're involved with on a day-to-day basis, for me, it's podcasting. I record, I edit, I write up scripts, episode notes every day, 7 days a week. I live and breathe this stuff. Living like that, it is easy to take things for granted. It is easy to be so involved that I'm not seeing the big picture. And the big picture is, when I was a little kid, not inviting friends over, I used to play radio DJ on basically glorified baby monitors. There's a Radio Shack, or Realistic was the brand. You might remember that. Intercom system. I think I picked them up at a yard sale. The kind that a business person might have on his desk. Johnson, get in here. And I would set one on lock and talk into it and broadcast to, I don't know, the dog, my parents, whoever was in the house. Nobody. You might feel like that as a podcaster too. Sometimes it feels like we're broadcasting to nobody. And sometimes we are. So I'm thinking of milestones. I would suggest that you think about milestones, and not even just milestones, but what it is that you are doing and how amazing this is. This is incredible, man. I don't want to sound like that old guy in podcasting because I don't feel that way. But when I started radio in college, and we were doing reel-to-reel tape, a China marker, or grease pencil, it's called as well. People use it to mark China. Those are also used to mark magnetic tape, so you know where to chop your mistakes. You did that with a razor blade. Then you would use sticky tape to tape the magnetic tape together. Anyway, that's been a while. We've moved to digital, I don't know. Within a few years of me getting involved with radio, we were moving into digital. And I've definitely been in digital in the last 20 years since I've been doing podcasting. But the point is, it's easy to take that stuff for granted. Be like, oh yeah, it's easy. You got a studio in your house. You can reach the world. Easy. Well, maybe so. But don't take it for granted, because it hasn't always been this way, and it is still very, very powerful. Speaking of this power, something I've got coming up that you may be interested in, I'm going to do a solo podcast challenge in the upcoming month. If you go to bigpodcast.com, and if you get on the mailing list, I will send you information about this. Here is what it is going to look like. I've got 30 days of things for you to do to be a better solo podcaster. So if you're interviewing people, if you've got a co-host, if you're not very confident behind the mic, I've got little bitty things that you can do, one each day, to get more confidence, to have things to talk about, things that will help you design your on the mic presence and personality in a way that people want to listen to, in a way that attracts people. I will personally review every single thing that you record and you send to me. And it's not going to be just you and me. It's going to be you, me, and a lot of other podcasters. So you're going to be able to meet other podcasters who are working on solo podcasts just like you are. It's a no pressure environment. It's going to be a lot of fun. I would love for you to join us. It's the Solo Podcast Challenge. That is coming up. I will talk more about it on a future episode of Build the Big Podcast. If you want to get up-to-the-minute information, that's really the best way. Get on the mailing list at bigpodcast.com. While you are there, also subscribe to this podcast if you aren't already. That's at bigpodcast.com/subscribe. You've heard me talk about it. One click is all it takes. I got a button for iPhone, a button for Android, and an RSS feed. Go to bigpodcast.com. That will hook you up with all of it. And I will see you on the Solo Podcast Challenge. Let's talk about Big Podcast AMP. AMP, it stands for Audio Monetization Program. And if you like this newsletter, you're going to love Big Podcast AMP. It's a personal coaching program that will help you do three things. 1, grow your podcast audience. 2, get people talking about your podcast. 3, make more money with your podcast and your podcasting skills. I mentioned doing other production work, other hosting work. People call me in to do radio ads for them. There's a lot of work in podcasting and audio. You can be part of it if you're interested in doing this. I've got more information for you at bigpodcast.com/amp. That's bigpodcast.com/AMP. Hype. Can it grow your YouTube audience? This is not a YouTube podcast. I am an audio first guy. However, there's a big audience on YouTube. A lot of audio podcasters use YouTube to grow an audience, either because they're putting their audio on YouTube or they're using video clips to drive traffic from YouTube to their audio-only podcast. YouTube's got a new thing called Hype. That's a feature that's designed to help smaller creators reach new audiences and grow their channels. They call it hyping videos. And this is funny to me because when I got started in the music industry, one of the things that I did was hype and street promotion. Those are my two main things. And that's basically somebody new, in this case, a new creator, you are building a buzz around that person. YouTube is doing a digital version of that. And this is how it works. If you've got an audience or somebody who sees your video and they like it, that viewer can hype the video to help their favorite creator, that's you, climb the hype leaderboard and gain visibility. The leaderboard is basically a chart. An album chart, Billboard, Cashbox, a book chart, New York Times, USA Today. This is another chart. People are looking for new stuff to consume. And if you can get on this chart, it can be very beneficial to you because once you get on it, I'm not going to say it's easy to stay on it. There's always people that are trying to kick you off of it. But once you are on it, especially those top slides, people are looking at you and they're going to like your stuff. So they hype it and the cycle continues. And with the holidays coming up, let me tell you this. This is a secret. New content creation slows down during the holidays. So if you can be on that chart around, let's say, Thanksgiving, running out through December, maybe even into January when people are coming back to work and that creation starts ramping up again, that's a good thing because that chart basically freezes. There's not as much competition. There are a lot of people coming in because they're getting new computers, new phones. They're looking for something to entertain them on those computers and those phones. There's your opportunity with this. Let's talk about how it works. As I mentioned, it allows viewers to hype videos from creators, but the creators, this is the catch, they've got to be new, and that's under 500,000 subscribers. So that's a lot. That's a lot. You may have way under 500,000 subscribers. Well, you can be part of this too. Fans can hype up to 3 videos per week, so they can't just do this for everything. And there's a small creator bonus, maybe that's you, way under 500,000 subscribers, that helps smaller channels compete. So this thing is weighted. I don't know exactly how it's weighted, but it sounds like the fewer people you've got, maybe you've got an advantage there. Hyping does not influence YouTube's recommendation or search algorithms. This is a completely different thing. But again, if somebody's looking at that chart, that's how they're being exposed. That's actually a good thing for you because you're not worried about competing against recommendations. You're looking at other people on the chart. And it's actually less conflicting thing to bring people away from your content. Hyping provides an interactive way for fans to support their favorite creators and help them grow their channels. So if you've got somebody who really believes in what you're doing, loves the podcast, loves your message, wants to help you out, let them know about Hype. I've got more information on this at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 200. Tim's new rules for podcasting. And this is Tim Ferriss. Love him or hate him, his podcast has been downloaded over 1 billion times. Recently, he's added some new rules, and I think you're going to find these interesting, and they might be something you want to consider for your podcast. I thought this was really interesting. Number 1, no more book launching episodes, meaning when I come out with my new book, Tim Ferriss isn't interested, with the exception only for close friends, and at least 3 months before the book's publication date. I'm not a close friend of Tim Ferriss, so the chance of me doing a book launch episode is actually only slightly worse than it was when he was actually doing book launch episodes. But I think this is really interesting. I know it's happening. The dude's probably getting inundated by publishers, publicists, authors. Book launch episode, book launch episode, book launch episode. He's got a production runway. He doesn't want to be involved with these guys that are launching books that are doing 100 podcasts and are on every other podcast. So you go to Tim, you go to Jim, you go to Dick, you go to Jane. It's the same basic episode. He wants to stand out. And that's what he's saying here. 3 months before the book's publication date, he will talk to you about it. Hey, this is coming up. You want to pre-order it? It's there now. It sounds like basically he wants to be the first. You want to work with Tim, you got to work with his rules. And I like this. I think it's good for you to have rules with people who approach you. A lot of times what will happen, and I see what this happens. I'm working on a live event right now that is in 4 weeks. And getting media for it, I know it's annoying to go to these places and say, hey man, you want to cover this? You want to cover this? Can you squeeze this in? Can you get this on? Get it aired right before this event? These guys have a production runway. It takes them a minute to get something on the air. They've got a plan for it. So I'm sure that's why he's doing this. He's sick of these last minute publicists, publishers, authors that he knows. Tim, get this in there. Get this in there. He's already got a plan. He's minding his own business, and you're coming in there trying to mess with that. I think it's going to make it a better podcast. You might want to have those kind of rules because it's going to make your podcast better. You don't have to say yes to everything, even if you know somebody. This is the other thing he's doing about guests, and I think this is really interesting. He calls it a 90-10 barbell strategy. Imagine that, a barbell. It's a bar, a weight on each end. He's going to focus on guests known by either more than 90% of his audience or less than 10% of his audience. So he's either got very, very popular people or completely unknown people. There's no middle ground. He's playing the edges. Prioritize interviews with living legends and masters of their craft who rarely do podcasts. I think that's interesting. A lot of people, as they get more and more established, they don't do interviews for whatever reason. They don't need to anymore. Or maybe they just don't like to. So getting to sit down with them, it's nice. I told the story about sitting down with Dolly Parton. She's not easy to get to. That's not to say that she's not doing a lot of interviews, but she's not doing interviews with guys like me. She might go to Tim Ferriss. She would qualify for this. Over 90% of his audience is going to know her, and he would find a way to ask her about maximizing whatever it is that she maximizes. He's in the position where somebody in his mansion on the hill might walk down to do that interview. And that makes him look good. Think about guys like Larry King, Howard Stern, the guys that are really known for interviewing people, especially Stern. He's not interviewing just everybody, not anymore. And he wants to be known as a great interviewer. And my guess is that that's what's happening with Tim Ferriss. You want to be known as a great interviewer? Start putting these guests through a filter. Don't let all of them through. Number 4, increasing experimentation with different podcast formats and styles to keep the show fresh and fun. This is what I'm curious about. And I wrote a book. It's called 101 Podcast Episode Templates. It's available on Amazon. I think the digital version, 99 cents. It's not that much. Go to bigpodcast.com/books if you are interested in that. I'm all about different segments. I'm all about different formats. You can go too far with your experimentation if the audience doesn't know what they're getting or if there's not some kind of semblance of something that they do know. Let me give you a music example. I'm going to tune my guitar EAD-GBE. There are going to be certain chords that I play. There's a certain sound that you expect from a guitar. If I take off a couple strings, tune the remaining 4 strings in a weird way, it's going to sound different. You're not going to recognize the chords. Maybe there's dissonance. Same thing with a podcast. So I'm curious about what he's doing here. Podcasting, it is a place to experiment. If you're interested in doing that, again, I've got the book, 101 Podcast Episode Templates. So I'm all for that. I would suggest doing that in segments, not throwing your whole podcast on its head and changing the entire format. We'll see what he does. He's tried this before. I think he took out ads from his podcast. He saw a big chunk of money that was missing. Put those ads back in. He's done a lot of experiments in the past. That's how Tim Ferriss really got on the map for what he does. That was the name of his TV show, The Tim Ferriss Experiment. And like Google, with their experiments, he dropped a lot of them because they don't always work. But it's going to be interesting to watch. Maybe it'll inspire you to play around with your podcast because this is how podcasts get better. Again, I've got the book, 101 Podcast Episode Templates. I've got the new rules for Tim Ferriss's podcasting, all of it at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 200. Are you making these podcasting mistakes? The answer is probably. We all are. There are a lot of parallels in life, and among them are those of websites and podcasts. I found an article about websites, and that got me thinking about podcasts and how to make them better. Tell me if you can honestly say yes to these questions. Is it clear what your podcast is about? This podcast is called Build a Big Podcast. You've probably heard me say why before. It's not because I like that title. It's because I let you know what you get when you play this podcast. Clear beats clever every time. So that's number one to ask yourself. Is it clear what your podcast is about? When I look at the artwork, when I see the title, when I hear the title from somebody saying it to me, when I read your description, when I hear the first 30 seconds of an episode, is it clear what your podcast is about? Number two, is it easy to listen and subscribe to your podcast? Earlier, I talked about bigpodcast.com/subscribe. If you do not have a dedicated subscribe page, go to that page, bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Steal it. Take the copy. Obviously, put your podcast in place of mine. But feel free. Take the graphics. As I mentioned, there's a one-button option for iPhone, Android, RSS. You've got to make it very easy for people to listen to you, and that would be a web-based player. Or if you're doing your audio podcast, put it on YouTube. Everybody knows how to go to YouTube. Make it easy to listen to. Make it easy to subscribe to. So again, bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Go there. Feel free to steal the images, the copy. Make yourself a subscribe page. Number three, is your audio professional? Man, we don't need to worry about that. People don't care about audio. They care about content. People say that to me. And that is not true. You are judged on the quality of your audio. The better your audio, the less people will judge you on your content. And you don't mind being judged on your content. Hopefully you've got great content. However, if you come in with 2 tin cans and a string and you deliver the very best content that you've got, people aren't going to know that because of that judgment. They're going to automatically assume, this guy's content's no good. If you don't care about the audio quality, you don't care about the content. Sort of like a car on the road. If you see a car on the road and it's scratched up, dinged up, rusted out on the outside, you're going to assume the inside, the engine, hasn't been maintained. If you're not going to maintain the outside, you're not going to maintain the inside. Same thing for your podcast. Number 4, is it easy for people to spend money with you? And this is assuming that you're running a business, you want people to spend money with you. Maybe give you donations. Is it easy? Don't make people go to Bitcoin or say, I only take paper checks. People make it much harder than it needs to be to receive money. It's like going to a store. You got to fill out this credit application. We don't take cash. We don't take Visa. All the ways people normally pay. Make it easy for people to give you money. Number 5, do you have a clear call to action? What do you want people to do when they are listening to your podcast or after they are listening to your podcast? Clear call to action on this podcast, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. I say it all the time. And I mentioned this at the very beginning of the episode. Don't worry about writing it down. You will have it memorized by the time this episode is over because I say it all the time. So with that said, you can go to newsletter.bigpodcast.com and get the list of these. Let me give them to you one more time, though, just to make it easy on you. Can you say yes to the following questions? 1, is it clear what your podcast is about? 2, is it easy to listen and subscribe to your podcast? 3, is your audio professional? People are judging the inside, the content, by what they hear on the outside. Number 4, is it easy for people to spend money with you? And number 5, do you have a clear call to action? If not, make it happen. You want help? That's what Big Podcast AMP is for. bigpodcast.com/AMP. BBC sound effects, you can get them free. There's a lot of good stuff coming from the BBC. And this sound effects library has been around forever, but they have just opened it up. It's got everything. I had a huge list here, but I was running out of ink printing it out for my outline. So I did 3 A's here. AAA, aircraft, animals, applause. This is good stuff. Listen to this.
Mind the gap. Stand clear of the doors, please.
All right. That is going to make your podcast so much more professional. Again, people are listening to your podcast and judging you by audio. They are in the theater of the mind mode. When you're telling a story, your guest is telling a story. Tell that story with audio. You can do that with the BBC Sound Effects Library. You can get it free. I have the links for you to do that at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. If you use these, I want to know. I'm happy to spread the word about what you're doing. Show your creativity. You can reach out to me via Mastodon, Blue Sky, or Threads. You got those links to reach out to me? Do it. If not, you will find them at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Why am I so tired? All right, true story, no joke. I took a nap before I recorded this episode. I'm tired, man. You think it's because I just turned 52? Am I getting old? I've been doing this for so many years. This is a joke. You know, I like to put a joke in every issue of Big Podcast Insider. It is visual. You will see it at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. And the topic is this, and I want you to be honest when I ask you this question. How many nights this week have you stayed up late working on your podcast? For me, more than I'd like to admit. Because you want to get your podcast out. And we get into perfectionism. And we get into editing. And we get into, well, you know, this audio wasn't cleaned up as well as it could have been. So let me try to touch it up a little bit. Because, as I mentioned earlier, people are judging you on the quality of your audio. And then it's a cycle. You get up, you're tired. It takes you longer to do your podcast than it would have if you weren't tired. So you stay up later, go to sleep later, wake up earlier, then you're tired again. I want you to own it. Why am I so tired? I got a t-shirt you can buy if you want it. You're going to like this. It's at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Classified ads, things will help you to grow your podcast, get more people to your podcast, to make a podcast that people care about. NoteJoy is a way to simplify your podcast production. It makes it easy for you to communicate with guests, co-hosts, and producers. You can do it via mobile. You can do it via desktop. I love NoteJoy. I've used it, 5 or 7 years. It's very similar to Evernote. People are moving away from Evernote to NoteJoy. It is cheaper. I think it's better, a lot more simple. Whether you're collaborating in real time or across time zones, NoteJoy is going to make you feel like you're in the same room. I've got an opportunity for you to try it for free, and you can do that at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Audio Pen. This is the easiest way to convert your messy thoughts, all those messy thoughts in your head, into clear text. Audio Pen's got a new app. You speak into your phone just like you're having a conversation. Blah, 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 blah. Talk about this, blah, 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 blah. Here's a list, add this, blah, blah, blah. Then it's going to organize those thoughts. It's going to give you an episode outline. You can do your episode notes with it. Let it analyze your podcast. It's very cool. You can try it for free. I've got it linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Hey, thanks for hanging out with me on the audio edition of Big Podcast Insider, issue 200. Another day, another issue. People ask me about this. It comes out weekly, but I'm working on it daily, looking for one story every day. And I'm basically working on it 24/7. If I see something that I like, something that I think that might benefit you, I say, oh, that might be good for the insider. I save it, go back to it, write a little something up, get it out in the print version at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Then do this audio version. If you're not subscribed to it yet, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. And if you're not subscribed to this podcast yet, you can do that at bigpodcast.com as well. Do it. I don't want you to miss an issue. And I've got some great stuff coming up. I talked about the solo podcast challenge. This is going to be cool. A bunch of people just like you who want to get better at solo podcasting. It's going to give you more options. Co-host flakes, no problem. Guest flakes, no problem. Just feel like going out on your own and keeping all the money? No problem. This is going to help you do that. We're going to have a lot of fun doing it. More information coming up this week in my newsletter on the mailing list, bigpodcast.com. I'll let you sign up for all of those things. Also, on future episodes of Build a Big Podcast. So do go to bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Make sure you are subscribed. Never miss an episode. And I'll see you on the next one of Build a Big Podcast.